for joining us this morning for the ISC and DNSco quarterly update. My name is Laura Hendriksen, and I will be handling the opening portion here. So again, thank you. We want to welcome you. We're going to be talking at you for about 45 minutes this morning. All of our attendees are on mute. We will be doing question and answers at the conclusion of the webinar. We will be trying to capture all of the questions that are submitted via the chat window and make sure that we share responses with a follow-up email at the end. But in case we miss anything, please feel free to submit your questions to info@ISC. And as I said, we're recording this and we'll share that and a follow-up email. So our agenda for today is to give you an update on what's been going on with ISC and DNSco. Probably the thing that you're really here to hear about is the upcoming releases in the next generation, which are part of our roadmap. And the presenters today will be myself, Laura Hendriksen, Vice President of Business Development, which means I do a little bit of everything to keep ISC and DNSco going. Vicki Risk, who's responsible for product management, and Eddy Winstead, who I'm sure many of you guys know as our Senior Systems Engineer. So we're very pleased to announce that we've had some changes in leadership. Jeff Osborne, who joined us earlier this summer, has been promoted recently to the Executive Director of ISC as well as President of DNSco. So we're thrilled to have him in that role. And then we also have Vicki Risk, who's joined us. I listed her on the presenters for today. Although she has done a lot in preparation for this, she won't be speaking very much, but I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a moment. She is here and responsible for getting our product management group moving, and externally and internally, she is our product advocate, and her email address is there. So, Vicki, if you'd like to say hello and tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be joining ISC. I'm coming from Cisco Systems, where I was a product line manager for about 15 years. I have my email address here. I'd like to invite you all to feel free to email me with questions about the roadmap or any other issues that you want to raise. I'm more than available to speak on the phone as well, but I don't want to stand in the way of the roadmap presentation, so I'll just hand it back to Laura.
Thank you, and welcome again to Vicki. And I should say Jeff was very disappointed that he wouldn't be presenting today. He's currently at RIPE. He's doing a tour of meetings and conferences. It was OARC and NANOG last week. This week it's RIPE. And then next he'll be moving on to IETF, et cetera. So he's a busy guy, meeting our constituents. So, you know, one of the things that is somewhat misleading or confusing to people is exactly who and what ISC is. So we've tried to create a slide that will tell you at a glance who we are and what we do. The main things that we do, as everybody is aware, is we write software, bind in DHCP. We operate the FRoot name server. We provide hosted at cloud DNS services, if you will, for a number of other projects, and that is our core mission piece, what we consider to be our public benefit. Other things that we do include sponsored research projects like Open Home Gateway and open source routing, which you'll hear a little bit toward the end of the presentation. But the other piece are the commercial services that we offer. Used to be called support. We now call it subscription services because it's a bundle of services as opposed to just software support, our secondary hosting and training. And the way that all of these fit together, if you will, is ISC is recognized by the U.S. federal government, such as it is in today's political times, as a public benefit company. So we handle our commercial services, the support, the training, subscriptions, et cetera, in our commercial subsidiary, which we have branded DNSco. The money or the profits, if you will, from that commercial subsidiary flow into the open source so that we can continue to produce open source software, and meet our payroll for the engineers that are doing that. The other funding that we get for ISC's public benefit work is through donations, cost recovery on programs like Hosted At, and membership, the buying forum model, et cetera. Sponsored research is a slightly different animal. These projects are fully funded by their sponsors. ISC contributes to the overhead of these, if you will, and provides all of the overhead functions. But the whole goal of having a commercial subsidiary to fund the public benefit is to make us sustainable so that we can continue along our mission, providing quality software that all of you use. One of the things that we have renewed our focus on is gathering input from our constituency. And so we've recently launched a user profile survey. And this t-shirt, the ISC take on the Nighthawks painting by Edward Hopper, is your reward, if you will, at the Name D Diner. We put the survey live toward the end of September, so it's been up for about 3 weeks. We're getting about 70% of the people who start the survey complete it. So again, they must like that t-shirt. But the function and the goal of this survey is really to gather data so that we can improve our software in terms of usability and functionality that our constituents are looking for. And the questions that we ask vary from specific detail of what your configuration looks like to what your motivators are. For example, wanted to share a couple things with you today. How often do you upgrade? The users that have completed the survey so far do it less than 6 months, so every 6 months or so they're upgrading, or as frequently probably as we put out a release. And then others, about a third, are looking at once a year. It's no surprise the biggest influence on deciding to upgrade is a bug fix, but a lot of you are also looking at new features. So that is good feedback for us so that we know that there is a desire and a need for us to continue to update the software with new features, not just fix bugs. Now on the DNS side, we ask a lot of questions. Do you use authoritative? Do you use recursive, et cetera? All those questions are there, but we picked out a few things that, again, we thought might be of interest to everyone. About a third of the respondents are using external database tools to manage their DNS files, and we are continuing to improve our tools on that side as well. DNSsec is always a funny one. Only about a third of the people are using it, but fully half of the people are planning on it. With IPv6, half of the respondents are using it roughly, and about another half are planning. There was an interesting flip side to that on the DHCP respondents. If you look at the people who have implemented IPv6, you'll see that, again, about 40% have implemented it, and the remaining 50% are still very much interested, and some are just flat not going to do it. So that 20% number was interesting in terms of people who have no plans of going to IPv6. But probably the most, the piece of data that we continue to find amusing is, not amusing, but interesting, is the use of OMAPI. We have a very ardent OMAPI user base, and every time we try to kill the product, we are made aware that there are people who depend on it. So we will continue to work with OMAPI while we develop other tools that are perhaps more friendly at the same time. So there are other parts of this survey, and we will be publishing some blogs and additional data on this. but we'd really like you to add your own feedback. We want to make sure the survey is representative of as wide a group of users as possible. You do get to earn a shirt, and it is a cool shirt, but the other part is we really would like your help to continue to improve BIND and DHCP. Now this survey, another little interesting tidbit, we used to ask for emails before people downloaded, and there was quite a hue and a cry about that particular policy, but instead we put up a 30 or 40 question survey and asked people to complete that, and I guess a t-shirt is a powerful motivator because I said we've had quite a good response to this, and we look forward to continuing to collect that data to improve our software. I'm almost done. You're almost to the product roadmap. But one other thing we'd like to do is say there are frequently ISC people running around hither and yon among the community, and we'd like to make sure if you're at the same venue that we are, that you get a chance to meet some of us and share your ideas or suggestions personally, face-to-face. So we have a few upcoming events listed in calendar order, if you will. We will be at the Usenix LISA conference in DC in early November. Our booth number is 309. Feel free to stop by and see Eddy in person. We'll also have Leah Sameha there for any of you that know Leah. And then at IETF 88 coming up in Vancouver, we're going to be doing 2 technology demonstrations. One is on the Open Home Gateway software, and the other is on our next-gen DHCP server, codename Kia, if you will. Both of those are sponsored projects by Comcast, and so we will be demonstrating within the Comcast space at that. So both exciting things coming up there. Eddy will talk a little bit more about some changes that are coming to RRL in December, the classifier functionality, and we'll be holding a webinar about that feature in November. And then very exciting, DHCP 4.3 is coming, and we will be holding a webinar on that in December. So you can look forward to receiving more information on those things. The other item that I want to cover or mention is that webinars are held for the benefit of our customers and our prospects. So if there are specific topics that you would like more information on, please feel free to send those either to me. I'm Laura H. at isc.org for your webinar topic suggestions, or you can send them to the info at ISC that was on a previous slide. And I did just want to restate that the technology demo at IETF will be in the Comcast meeting space. We'll make sure we send that out in a follow-up email so that everyone can find us there that might be looking for us. So without further ado, what I would like to do is transfer the ball, as it's called in WebEx parlance, to Eddy, and we will let Eddy move forward with the product roadmap. So we thank you with your time and attention. Take it away, Eddy.
Okay, thank you, Laura, very much. As Laura mentioned, I'm Eddy Winstead. I'm an engineer here at ISC. I've done things from consulting to support to training. Many of you have been in some of the training classes I've given, so good to see you today. And so let's get started on the roadmap. To start the roadmap, I'd like to start with a bit of a poll and ask how many of you are actually using ISC DHCP, what version are you running, and if you're not using ISC DHCP, we'd like to know what you are using for that functionality. That poll runs about 5 minutes, so we'll continue on as you're working on that. Okay, so as we start talking about the roadmap, if you will, we'd like to do a little bit of a look through the rearview mirror, so to speak. And so DHCP 4.1 was actually released in December of 2008. that seems like, wow, a very long time. Time flies when you're having fun, as they say. Fast forward to today, 4.1-ESV.R8 is our current extended support version, and we will be having a 4.1 ESV R9 coming out in February of next year. One of the themes that Laura talked a lot about is we'd like to hear from you, and we are listening. And so one of the things that we have heard a lot from our constituents is we need really long advance notice when you're going to EOL a product. And so this is one of the actions of us listening to you. So 4.1 will be put in EOL status in December of next year. So that's about 14 months away. We will be continuing to announce that throughout the coming months. Some of the features that we have listed here, you'll notice there's an IPv6 theme going on there, and that's really setting up what we're going to talk about when we talk about the roadmap for 4.3. So in essence, with 4.1, you get really good DHCP v4 functionality, and we began to see some basic IPv6 functionality in 4.1. In 4.2, which was originally released in July of 2010, the major features or improvements there were asynchronous dynamic updates, or dynamic DNS. So this allowed for the DHCP server to continue processing DHCP packets while DDNS updates were being queued. This was a huge performance improvement for a lot of you. The other improvements that happened in 4.2 were failover related. So we put a lot of effort into making failover meet the standards, or the proposed standards, I should say, in 4.2. So as we go to 4.3, what we're really seeing for 4.3 is an IPv6 feature uplift. So if you look at some of those standard and basic ones down there that we did for 4.1, you'll see in the coming slides that we're really trying to provide a lot of feature parity that you have in DHCP v4 with what you're going to be doing in DHCP v6. And that is going to be done in 4.3. So while we're allowing for the poll results to be completed, here's a quick little cartoon for your enjoyment. It's essentially amusing ourselves about those in the future that will run into problems because IPv6 just wasn't enough. If you're like myself, you probably, when the first time you saw IPv6, you kind of thought, wow, I'll probably be retired by the time that stuff gets implemented. The joke is on me and or us. As we see, we are moving to IPv6, though slowly. So 4.3 is going to be released in alpha status in December of this year. And again, we're calling it the IPv6 uplift. There are some DDNS changes. We are upgrading to more current IETF standards to allow for essentially trying to work around the issue of naming conflicts for clients that have both an IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. So there's that. There's also, Laura mentioned OMAPI, and again, this goes back to listening to you all. One of the things that we hear, I'd say on almost every call that I'm on, people want the ability to make changes to their DHCP configuration without having to restart. And this is one of the areas, currently the only area that we are doing this in is in OMAPI, and some more of that on the Kia side. We'll get into that a little later. But note that 4.3 does contain OMAPI subclass control. An example of this is, like, we hear a lot from ISPs that they have growing networks, and so the idea is that you'll be able to define pools and classes ahead of time, which does require a restart of the DHCP server. but quote unquote on the fly, you'd be able to do some subclass controls with a MAPI, which should allow you to add hosts as you're moving forward without having to restart. More about the IPv6 feature uplift. There will be class support for IPv6. And again, I keep stressing this, but we are listening to you. We had several tickets open in our support organization about wanting class support for IPv6, those of you that are currently using 4.2 or 4.1. And so we've listened, and it is going to be in 4.3. I'll also add that a lot of the DDNS changes that we implemented were based on conversations that we have with support customers in that area. So we'll have access to IPv6 relay options, the on-expiry and on-renew features that you've been making use of in DHCP v4. You will now be able to do so in DHCP v6. And we're also extending the existing data type options that you've been using in DHCP v4 to make those same data type options available in DHCP v6. Note they will not always be the same option number as we go by whatever the option numbers are defined in the standards. But that is the main takeaway we want you to have from 4.3 is if you're implementing IPv6 and you want to use DHCP, please do use ISC DHCP 4.3. Again, the alpha is going to be out in December, so we are looking for people to do testing of this. So as we make the alpha available, please do feel free to test and send us feedback. Of course, maybe you'll have some holiday time over in December. You can play around with the 4.3 alpha. So we're going to segue now into bind. And so we'd like to do another poll, and I saw a note that the previous poll ended a little early, so my apologies for that. We'll try to have our folks not do that again, let the poll run for the whole time. You have 5 minutes to do it. We want to know what versions you're running. As you see there, we've got 9.5 or earlier. We do ask that you be honest, and so I promise not to look at the logs and track down whoever said they're running 9.5 or earlier. And there's probably also a joke in there about, can you trust an ISC person saying that they will not look at the logs? But we shall move on. So again, as we did with DHCP, we're going to take a look in the rear view and also try to give you more notice about when we're going to EOL things. 9.6 happened back in 2005. Again, wow, that is a good while ago. And there was DNSsec support in 9.6, and some zone re-signing improvements occurred in 9.6 as well. 9.6 eventually became our ESB version of bind. We are currently on 9.6 ESB R10. And again, back to listening to you, we originally announced that we were going to EOL bind 9.6, and the original EOL date was in July of 2013, and we just didn't get the message out good enough, and so we've extended that EOL period until January of 2014, so a full 6 to 7 months there, and we're continuing to get the word out to people. I hope all of you that are on this call that this is not a surprise to you at this point. We are, again, attempting to get much better at communicating when we are going to EOL. Oops. So in 2011 is when bind 9.8 came out. You'll notice that I don't have 9.7 on this timeline, and that is because 9.7 is already in EOL status. But many of you know bind 9.7, the tagline for that one was DNSsec for humans. And so, yes, you could do DNSsec in 9.6, and a lot of us did, but it became much more easier in 9.7. And a lot of us went to, during that time, dynamic updates for our DNS, because bind at that time would take dynamic updates and do all the signing magic for you, which made deploying DNSSEC and maintaining it very much more easier. Also, for the good of all of us, the root got signed in 2010, and so 9.8 introduced the built-in trust anchor for root. We also introduced RPZ and DLZ. We are currently at 9.8.6, and 9.8 will remain in development for some time as well. So in 2012, we came out with Bind 9.9. Now this was another significant improvement in the DNSSEC world with the addition of inline signing. So for those that had not implemented DNSSEC yet, one of the major hurdles was people really didn't want to change how they were modifying or making additions to their zone data. So in prior versions of Bind, you had to modify how you were making your changes to your zones. With inline signing, you were offered the ability to keep things exactly the same as far as your procedures for modifying data, and have the signing take place in some other area, be that on the server itself or in terms of like a hidden master arrangement. You could transfer your zone out to essentially an inline signing server that would do all the signing on that server, and then that could be transferred out to your secondaries that were the authoritative servers visible to the world. So this was a huge improvement in DNSSEC. Note there also that in Bind 9.9.4, we released basic RRL into the open source version, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that in just a few moments. Bind 9.9 became our ESV version as well, so we are EOLing 9.6 again in January of next year, and 9.9 will continue on as our ESV version. So 9.10 Alpha will be out in the coming weeks, I should say. It will either be this week or the following week when the Alpha will be released. There's quite a bit of bullets there under there. I'm going to save those. We have a drill down slide that talks about those directly that will be coming up next. But note that 9.10 Alpha is coming out very shortly. So another thing that happened this year, and many of you are aware, is that we released our very first subscription edition of Bind. And a little bit about how this has played out. So the very first subscription edition had basic RRL in it, the GOP, ACL, DSCP, and some RPZ performance improvements. If you note the broken arrows there, you'll note that though it came out first in the subscription edition, we very quickly moved that basic RRL functionality into the open source version of 9.9.4. The reason, again, goes back to us listening to you. A lot of our constituents wanted basic RRL functionality and had to have it, essentially. The Red Barn patches were great, but a lot of people had policies and procedures that they could not patch their named with third-party software. And I'm glad to see we had 0% on the 9.5 and earlier. That's good. So if we actually went against some of our policies in that we usually don't introduce new major features in a minor release, 9.9.4 being a minor release, 9.10 being a major release. And so originally scheduled for 9.10, we ended up putting it in 9.9.4 just from the overwhelming demand, not only from our constituents, but for what we felt like was the overall good in terms of internet health in dealing with having a way to mitigate some of the DDoS attacks that we're seeing. So as the orange line indicates up top, we are continuing with the subscription edition. However, I'll say that with also we want to hear feedback from you on how this is working out for you. Has this made your processes easier to follow your processes and procedures by having a subscription edition or not? And so We appreciate your honesty, and so let us know how that is working out for you. So the other thing to notice with the second broken arrow there is that the GeoIP and the RPZ improvements moved from the subscription-only edition and are going into the 9.10 alpha. The area that we are currently focusing on with the subscription edition is some RL classifier. And classifier is just it's really a term for what's essentially more knobs. People have reached out to us and said, we like what's happening in RL. However, we would like to have a few additional knobs to control that configuration. And so with the QName part of RL, that is a way that you can say, if I get queries that are of this name, don't begin to drop responses for them or slip them. So it's essentially a whitelisting of sorts. And then with the RL response size, that's really a way, the majority of what we're seeing is, of course, people are wanting to do amplification attacks. And so if you can set an RL response size where only responses over this size do we begin to slip or drop, it really makes your server unattractive to those that are launching the attacks while still being able to reply as you normally would for smaller response sizes. So here's our drill down into the features that are arriving in 9.10 alpha. Again, the RPZ performance improvements that went into subscription edition are going to be in 9.10. You will be able to do some ACLing based on GeoIP. Some of you are familiar with the MaxMinds database, and this is a way for Bind to interact with that database. There are free versions of the database and purchased versions of the database that you get from a party other than ISC. But this allows you to begin doing things like have an authoritative server respond differently based on what GeoIP information is contained in the database. With stats, again, this goes back to us listening. So on there was a Bind users post a while ago about someone using, so currently Bind uses XML for its statistics, and someone had said, you know, XML is great, but it's really kind of cumbersome and produces very large data sets. It'd be awesome if we could do this with JSON. And we said, you know what, that is a pretty good idea. So starting with 9.10, the default will be JSON for statistics. XML is still available. So some people still prefer to use XML, and some people have done a lot of work making sure that they can present their XML stats appropriately. So that functionality is still there. You essentially you have an option now. There'll also be 64-bit Windows support, PKCS 11 native support. The idea here is you'll be able to get going a little faster with integrating with HSMs, and also a map zone format. And so this is really taking the memory image that Bind uses, and we use mmap to get that onto disk. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of checks involved with making sure there's no corruption that happens there. But if you have a large number of zones or a number of zones that are very large, this is something for you to test out during the alpha phase. This will be an option at first, and we expect as this matures and gets more stable, this may be the default in later versions of Bind. But we're really excited about the faster loading times that it provides. There's also, many of you use RNDC status to check on the status of your name servers right now. There's a new command, RNDC zone status, where you can check on a per zone basis. Also, named-check zone and named-compile zone can now read journal files. We also have multiple DLZ databases are now possible. So previously this was done on a global basis, and now these can be, DLZ zones can be configured per zone. And as we've talked, IPv6 is growing in nature, and so 9.10 Bind will listen on IPv4 and IPv6 by default. So future bind 9 features, and here we put bind 9.in because, again, we want to hear your feedback on where you think these should go, subscription edition, open source, where do you think they should land? Currently, the RL classifier work, again, is going first into the subscription edition, and I talked about the queue name and response size that we're working on in that area. As Laura pointed out, we'll also be having another webinar before the end of the year to talk specifically about RL classifier. Negative trust anchor support. So this is a must-have that we hear from a lot of operators who want to implement DNSSEC validation. So this is something that would take place on the resolver side and is a way for you to, per domain, say do not validate for this domain. So for an example, we've all seen several, I won't name any names, but we've all seen several domains that have implemented DNSSEC and have run into some sort of problem. Interestingly enough, some of those have been quote-unquote off the radar for a day or two, which is a long time. And what that looks like for an operator that has implemented DNSSEC validation is the users are calling you, the operator. They're not calling the administrator of the domain who has, I don't know, maybe had a problem with the DS in the parent zone or whatever problem they've run into with their DNSSEC implementation. They're not the ones getting the phone call. The one getting the phone call is the operator of the resolver that's doing the validation. So trust anchor support, negative trust anchor support would be a way to temporarily turn off validation per zone. So that when the operator of the zone actually has the problem corrected and things are validating again, you can then remove this and begin validating that domain again. Bind 9.in+1, again, we don't know exactly which versions this is going to go into, but these are some of the things that we're looking at. So EDNS 0 client subnet identifier is a way for a resolver to pass on subnet information to an authoritative server about the client that is originating the query. This would allow for some more of ways authoritative servers could respond based on where the location of the queries are originating from. DNS client cookies is some work that's being done within the IETF about how we could further deal with these amplification problems. So just note that we're watching where the standards go in that area. EDNS 0 server diagnostics would be a way for resolvers to provide more information on why validation is failing. So this would be another DNSSEC improvement on the resolver side. The ability to give more information about why a certain domain is not validating. The main thing we want to stress here is that more Bind 9 versions are planned. Bind 9 is not going away anytime soon. More features are planned for Bind 9. Support is planned for Bind 9. It will continue on. So we want to stress that. And at the same time, I'm sure that brings up a question of, well, what are you doing about next generation software? So let's get right into that. So yes, we are working on next generation DNS and DHCP software. Many of you know this as Bind 10, and we have several Bind 10s of the Bind 10 sponsors on the call today, and we do wish to express heartfelt thanks to them for the funding of the Bind 10 work that has occurred. Many of you may not know that Bind 10 was a 5-year project plan that was operated on a sponsorship model. That model, for many varied reasons, was abandoned at year 4. And so what we really want to take now is take the good parts of what was done in that work for the next generation DNS and DHCP, and attempt to mend some of the things that didn't work so well in that whole arrangement. So we're moving forward on that front. So time for another quick poll. We want to know, have you downloaded or tried Bind 10? One of the things that we found from the survey that Laura was talking about earlier is that 14% of folks had actually had downloaded and run Bind 10. We were actually pleasantly surprised that the number was that high. We're excited about the work that's gone into Bind 10, and we're excited about where it's going. And so that was a really good number to see for us. So for those of you on the call, let us know if you're running Bind 10. All right. The key requirements remain the same. So whether you call it Bind 10 or next generation, we still want to have DNS server that has separate authoritative and recursive functionality. I've also been given notice that I'm running a little behind, so it may speed up just a bit, so bear with me. We also are going to have extensible platform with software bus and plugin capability. New DHCP server being one such plugin. Easy for users and OEMs to customize, and scalable and high performance, of course. So even though we're short on time, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we mean by some of this. And if you think about Bind 9 and how it was designed, we're all very familiar with Bind 9 asserting. Bind 9 was developed with the idea that if it gets into a state that it doesn't really understand, or something appears to have gone wrong, we assert, we terminate. So while this makes the operator's life interesting, shall we say, because it's also done it to me, the idea was that if we didn't assert, we would potentially get into more trouble down the road, and we were trying to avoid some of those problems that occurred in Bind 4 and Bind 8. So that was such in Bind 9. Bind 10 wants to expand on that and have only parts of the functionality assert or terminate. So as we talk about modular design, you could have parts of the functionality go away in an assertion, and then have some way to restart that as well. The other thing about Bind 9 is it was designed, the core designs of it were, a decade and a half ago. And so since that time, there have been major and drastic improvements in hardware. And so one of the key requirements for our next generation DNS and DHCP software is that it take advantage of that new hardware. So there is an authoritative DNS server available now. If you go to bind10.isc.org, Bind 10 1.1.0 is available, and it is a functioning authoritative name server. We do know of one case, we're running it ourselves for the AS112 project. We actually have one of those servers in production running Bind 10. Of course, we have lots more planned in this area because it is just basic functionality right now. Some of that is listed here. So our next generation DHCP server, we are extremely excited about. This was a part of Bind 10 as well, with the code name of Kia. This is also available in the public domain as of November in that Bind 1.1.0 release. It has basic DHCP and DHCP v6 functionality. It has a backend of MySQL database. There's an experimental high-performance in-memory backend. So some of you in DHCP 4 were doing some of this experimental in-memory DHCPD.leases in-memory with mixed results. And so we have some of that going on as well. We're actually testing it out. One of the things that we're very happy to report is that with DHCP, ISC DHCP 4, we're looking at handling around 120 leases per second. What we've seen with Kia is about 1,000 leases per second. So orders of magnitude higher. With the experimental high-performance stuff, we're seeing a lot, but we haven't made it stable yet. So we're still working in that area, but it is much faster. I also want to point out that there is a performance testing tool available, and we know of one case where an entity has taken this tool, installed Bind 10, gotten this tool, and run it against their current ISC DHCP server for performance testing. That's one of the things that we've heard a lot from you all, is that you want performance testing tools. So that is on the horizon and is available in the publicly available Bind 1.1, Bind 10 1.1. So and we had about 13% say that they are running or have run Bind 10. So that's good. That about matches what we saw in the survey as well. So there is a demo coming up, as Laura mentioned, at IETF in Vancouver, and Comcast is sponsoring this. If you want more information on Bind 10 or next generation, you can look for these lists: Bind 10 users, Bind 10 announced, Bind 10 dev, and an easy place where all this is contained is at bind10.isc.org. Very quickly, part of our public benefit mission is also hosting forums or research projects. One of these is the open source routing forum. We have anchor sponsors of Google and Intel, and many of you already run Quagga in some fashion. We use Quagga in our lab environments, but essentially here we're working to encourage all the parties that are working on development of Quagga to cooperate and do things that play well with each other. Our Open Home Gateway Forum is sponsored by Comcast. We're very excited about this one. This is the mission is very simply to lead the evolution of new home router and gateway platforms. Again, we will be demoing what we've been doing in this area at IETF 88. If you're going to be there, please do come by and check it out. Okay, I think I ran just a few minutes over, so my apologies about that. We're now going to open it up for questions, and thank you for listening. One question is, have you considered SQLite as a backend for Kia? And the answer is yes. I do not know where that currently stands, but the answer is yes. And Chuck, I will follow up with you, or one of us will follow up with you after the webinar with more detailed information. So if you do have any other questions, please let us know. Yeah, and as Anna points out, let us know through the question and answer on your webinar. And I just got an update while we're sitting here waiting from one of our DHCP engineers that the back end, Chuck, for some more detail, the back end can be user configurable. So if the idea is that if we don't provide exactly what you want, you can write some code to tie into what it is you want to use for the back end database. Okay, we don't have any other questions coming in, which either means we did a great job or you're still pondering. So as you come up with questions, please do let us know. And again, we do want to hear from you. If you're going to be at Lisa by chance, Lisa and IETF happened to fall during the same week this year. If you're going to be at Lisa, please do stop by our booth. I believe it was number 309, and talk to me. I will be there. If you're at IETF that week, please do go check out our demos. Look for a follow-up email with links to recording of this presentation. And again, please do take our user profile survey. We do appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Take care.